So a couple of weeks ago, I was preparing for a podcast and I listened to an episode on Patrick Holford's podcast. It was with the guest who we were talking about. And they talked about this event which was happening in Wales on Patrick's farm. And I was super interested. It was about how to grow nutrient-dense food. So I sent an email to the website, which was on Food for the Brain. And a lady got back to me who subsequently happened to be, I found out happened to be Patrick's wife. And she said they were in Ireland on a book tour here. And I emailed and said, oh my God, you're in Ireland. We're based in Ireland. Do you want to come have lunch? And she said, geez, we're actually going to Bray today. And I said, do you want to have lunch this afternoon? And I met them for lunch. And it was just purely by chance we ended up meeting. And Patrick was someone who we'd admired for years. We had read his book in the 90s, The Optimum Nutrition Bible, which has sold millions of copies of worldwide.
And he's someone we really admired and looked up to. So it was gas to meet him in person, to have lunch and to find out he's hilarious. A man that's just bursting with life and has this real childish excitement and exuberance.
And absolute, like, his mind is incredible. He's authored over 30 books, which he sold millions of copies of. He's been a guest lecturer all over the world. He's just recently been on a tour in the States and the UK and Ireland, promoting his most recent book, which is Food for the Brain. Which has a charity as well, which is based around using nutritional science to help prevent dementia.
He's a wonderful speaker, storyteller, and someone that makes the complex simple and in a fun, digestible way. This is a really fun conversation that we adored.
Yeah, Patrick's been in the field of nutritional science for 3 to 4 decades. So he really has been at it right since he finished studying. He started writing immediately on the topic of nutritional therapy and how we can use foods and vitamins and minerals to really enhance the quality of our life and our brains and the functions of our bodies. So he really is a gift. This was a really fun conversation. As Stephen said, Patrick is a wonderful storyteller. And I got to go spend the weekend with him and he is such a laugh. He really, really is. He's an incredible poet and he writes rap songs as well. Like poetry, so he actually gave this, and at the end of this, hang on till the end of it where he talks about Beat the Bloat.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
He's really, really good.
You'll really enjoy this. This is a great conversation. So we give you the wonderful Patrick Holford.
Nutritional therapist extraordinaire.
We started one of Ireland's first juice bars back in about 2005 and literally have been juicing for over 30 years. It's one of the quickest way to rebuild your immune system and literally get the essence of any fruit and veg. It's something I do regularly to ensure that my kids are getting more fruit and veg and more high nutrient dense foods.
Yeah, we've partnered with a company called Nama Juicers. They make incredible quality juicers. They've innovated the standard juicer. It's an upright masticating juicer with a hopper. That means that you can juice hands-free. So you simply load the fruit and veg up the top and you don't have to, you just step away and it juices itself. It makes super high quality juice where the pulp literally comes out dry and it's easy to clean. They come with a 15-year warranty. They're offering you 10% off with the code HAPPYPAIR10. That's simply go to namawell.com, use the code HAPPYPAIR10 for 10% off at the checkout.
Wonderful juicer, couldn't recommend them more. We're all about nature, health, and living a natural way of life. Back about 8 years ago, a friend, Tony Riddle, suggested I have a pair of shoes, lads, that are going to transform your life. And it's like, go away, Tony.
They were a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes. They really were. They're amazing. They're minimalist, they're eco-friendly, and they're designed to let your feet move as freely as they would barefoot. It's about getting closer to nature with every step you take. They really are amazing shoes. They come in ranges for men's, women, for all aspects, kids.
They're a B Corp company, which means they're certified as being people working in a sustainable manner. Amazing people. We've hung out with them loads, and they really are at the forefront of health.
We believe in them so much that we've become ambassadors. It's all we've worn for the last 8 years, for running, for streetwear, for, they're
even tuxedos. When I wear a tuxedo, I got a nice kind of formal pair. So they do offer a full range. Use the code HAPPYPAIR20 to get 20% off your next pair.
And even as soon as I've got a baby girl, Fia, she's 8 months old. And as soon as she starts walking, I will definitely make sure she starts with a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes because they have a wide toe box, a minimal sole, and they'll really help connect her with nature and her natural movement.
Research has shown that if you do wear a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes within a number of months, your foot strength will increase by 60%.
So check them out, 20% off with the code HAPPYPAIR20 at checkout, vivobarefoot.com. Patrick Holford in the house. Woo! This is great fun. We literally had Optimum Nutrition when we were about 19. It was sitting at home and it used to sit on the table loads because mom. I definitely read bits of it. Yeah, I definitely did. It was a hard one to go. You didn't need to eat it all, like read it all. It was more
you could dip in.
Yeah, no.
It's wonderful to have you here in that you've been such a pioneer in the health food space for many decades. Like we've been in it 20 years and you've been way ahead of it. So
Yeah, 1980s. And I started in psychology, and something most people don't know, I actually had some mystical experiences as a teenager, not drug-induced. And I decided I would go to India. So I'm like 17. I'm going to go to India, find a guru and the meaning of life. And I
17?
Good
on you.
And I went to the doctor. I'd just done my A-levels, went to the doctor and got the hepatitis jab, gamma globulin, went home, sitting on the floor in my bedroom in London, and I had a total out-of-body experience. I went into infinity, eternity. Everything was energy. Everything was light. And
like a natural trip.
it was a natural trip, absolutely. And it was phenomenal. And I don't know how long it lasted because, I was in an eternal, infinite state. And I came back and realized I'm not going to go and do economics at university. I'm going to do psychology. And actually, the psychology is pretty lame. But we were studying neurochemistry in the brain. And when I got into the brain, I realized, my God, the brain.
But even back to your story, did you go to India and find the meaning of life?
Well, I did afterwards, but I actually find a teacher who's Bolivian, in fact, a genius. He spoke 15 languages. And he read all the original scripts, And, I mean, I'll tell you something totally freaky and way off the topic.
Great, it's getting really interesting.
No, but I mean, the point is, us Westerners, we go searching for the meaning of life, and we like India and we like Tibet. Well, actually, the real master was Socrates. I mean, our Western culture comes from the Greeks, and Socrates was the master, and his student was Plato. And then there were the Neoplatonists who had a method of enlightenment. And when the Roman Christian thing kicked off, they got kicked out of Athens and went into Herat in Persia. And the teachings went into Islam as Sufism. And from there it went to Afghanistan. And the founder of Tibetan Buddhism is an Afghani called Padmasambhava. And it went into India in the north through Kashmir. So the sort of Tantra of India actually, and Tibetan Buddhism, comes from the Greeks.
Hilarious.
It comes from the Greeks.
Wow.
And strangely, and it's kind of happening with food as well, is that even if you go and study philosophy these days, they've written out all the good stuff. They've written,
As in all the Greek, all Socrates.
well, all the spiritual stuff, really. And as a consequence, it's like we're losing connection. We're losing our sense of who we really are. And what the Greeks say, and everyone says this really because it's true, is that there are 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And the 5th is called ether, but the 5th is the consciousness in which we experience everything. So nutrition breaks down to fire, which is metabolism, and the importance of water, and the importance of air, and the importance of the earth. And I know we both love Dan Kittredge, the director of the Bionutrient Research Institute, and fundamental principles of creating the conditions that allow plants to incorporate nutrients, which become us. It's the same fundamental principles. And it's that kind of deep thinking. So
that is deep thinking.
It is
That
deep
is That's
thinking.
very much connected. Well, it links into, now we're going straight in
Yeah.
off the deep end here, but it really does connect with that. Like ultimately, we are entities that are made up of like what we eat and the inputs which we have. We are the substance of.
yeah, totally. I mean, and that is why the single most powerful thing that you can ever do for your health and your brain health and your mental health is what you put in your mouth. It is phenomenally important.
And it's something so many of us don't even consider because life is stressful. Food is, not only is it nutrients, but we see food as entertainment. We see food as an opportunity to connect. We see food as
Joy,
just to get
pleasure.
rid of these miserable feelings.
Yeah, and the thing about eating good food and hopefully growing some yourself is you actually connect with the food, you connect with making the food, the taste of the food, you share the food. It's fundamental.
So you've been at this for 40 years. Like what do you...
45.
45.
I'm 66. I've just got my paraglider license.
Very cool.
That is class. That is class. Like has your understanding changed dramatically through the decades, or have there been core pillars or assumptions which you had when you first got into this field?
It's evolved.
Yeah.
And I would say there's only about 2 things I was wrong on. The rest has all been right, but it's kind of the details have fitted in. And one of the amazing things, and a classic example, is right now I'm working with 14 of the world's leading professors from China to Japan to America to the UK on the prevention of Alzheimer's, because all the top people, and we're talking Harvard University, Washington, Oxford, etc., they all know that Alzheimer's is a preventable disease. And we can talk...
That's in most cases.
Well, there's less than 1% is in the genes. Wow. Less than 1% is in the genes. If you happen to inherit, it's called presenilin or AP gene in your family, then the odds are if it's in both your mother and father, you are going to get it, and you're going to get it early. But that is less than 1%. So the point, obviously we can go into that, because the clues as to how to never get Alzheimer's are also the clues to how to have a really, really sharp mind that sings, and a good mood and good energy and less anxiety and better sleep. It's all the same thing.
Because you were saying earlier that it's almost 1 in 9 now. It's one of the leading causes of death now.
Well,
it's dementia.
Alzheimer's and dementia.
The shocker, and I was saying this on Ireland AM a couple of weeks ago, there's a major global study published in The Lancet, and it said that 43% of the world's population, 3.4 billion people, have disability due to brain disorders. And this goes from autism to Alzheimer's. 43% of the world's population. It's the biggest cost. It costs more than all of cancer, all of heart disease, and some. It's the biggest killer. It's the biggest fear. And what we don't realize is that actually we are really heading for hell unless we change what we eat fundamentally and now, and get back to wild food. And the reason I say this is that brain size is literally shrinking. We've lost 20% of our brain size in the last 20,000 years, but it's really accelerated since the 50s. IQ is dropping 7% a generation. The Children's Society in the UK have reported a tripling in referrals for mental health. 2/3 of health claim benefits are for mental health. In the UK, I don't know the figures in Ireland, but I would imagine it's exactly the same. We have maybe 50 million adults. We've got 100 million prescriptions for antidepressants.
So it's 1 in 5.
100 million.
100 million. 1 in 5 on antidepressants. 3 million in the UK cannot get off them because of the withdrawal effects. And we're kind of, our whole medical system has completely, just become a front for the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, at Oxford University, where I do a lot of work with various professors, the doctors get 7 minutes of nutrition. They get thousands of hours of drugs, pharmacology.
Yeah. And in your experience, for anyone listening who kind of goes, I'm one of those people taking antidepressants, I'm one of those people struggling with mental health.
Yeah.
How does food have a significant role on mental health?
Well, it has a major role. And really we can say there are 4 horsemen of the mental health apocalypse. And the first one, the brain is 60% fat. When you take the water out, it's 60% fat. And, we have to have omega-3 and we have to have vitamin D. As you know, sunlight makes vitamin D. In the winter, it doesn't matter if you're vegan or not, you've got to supplement vitamin D.
Particularly living in Northern Hemisphere countries. Would that even be people living around the equator?
No, the equator is fine because they can get enough.
And what about someone who goes, I spend loads of time outside?
Well, you only make... It's quite a funny one, actually, because you make all your vitamin D in about the first 30 minutes. But the point is, between October and March, the angle of the sun is... Basically, if your shadow is longer than the length of your body, you're not making vitamin D.
That's a good way of gauging it.
So say that one again. So
if your shadow's bigger than you, like as in
longer than
if you're 6 foot tall and your shadow is 8 foot tall,
you cannot make vitamin D. So basically, I mean, it's such a no-brainer. Between October and March, we can't make vitamin D. And what happens is blood vitamin D levels drop and drop and drop. And by January, they're really low. February is really low. March is low. When does flu happen? January, February, March. When do people get depressed? January, February, March. So you can draw a straight line between vitamin D, depression. And the point about this is actually... And I know you guys, don't do fish, and we need to have just a little chat about that.
Definitely.
But if you look at countries' rates of murder and suicide, it tracks the amount of fish consumed by the country. So basically, the landlocked countries have much more murders, much more suicides. Now, if you are, by the way, vegan, and I read a book called Optimum Nutrition for Vegans, because you can be a healthy vegan, but you cannot do it without supplementing. You have to supplement B12. The Vegan Society told me off when I said,
I had my B12 this morning.
There's a little in shiitake or a little in whatever.
Very
They
little.
said cannot say that. You've got to say.
But even on that topic in the B12 one, what I've understood now is that whatever people's eating, whatever, whether they're omnivores or carnivores or vegans or paleo, whatever. I think, like, how I understand it now is most people, it's more beneficial to supplement B12 because whether you eat meat or not, there's quite a likelihood that you are deficient in it. Like what I've read is that they say
It's
three out of 10 people, regardless of their diet, are going to be deficient in B12. And it's particularly important as you get older.
Exactly. It's as you get older. And here in Ireland at Trinity College, they did a really good study called TILDA. And basically 3 in 5 people over 50 had insufficient level of B12 to stop accelerated brain shrinkage. I want to say for anyone who checks the facts or whatever, that there is a problem, which is that the level of B12 that you measure in the blood, in the EU and in Japan, you have to be above 500. And I'm not sure if Ireland is following EU or the UK, because in the UK, they say you're sufficient at 170, and it is wrong. So you have to have a blood level of 500 to not have accelerated brain shrinkage. Alzheimer's, here's the shocker, I'll tell you.
And brain shrink. So as you said, over the last 20,000 years, our brains have shrunk by 20%. And since the 1950s, it's kind of accelerated. So, and what you're saying there is over the age of 50, there's 3 out of 5 people are typically, deficient, lacking B12, which
not
further
because of what they
accelerates
eat, but because they're not absorbing it. Absolutely.
And B12, just for anyone who's listening, it's a bacteria that we would have historically got from drinking out of streams or from eating animals that drank out of streams. That's where it comes
you may
from.
ferment foods, and they used to think
Or
that
even
chlorella
working
and
in the land.
They used to think that chlorella and spirulina had B12 in it. It only does if it's actually contaminated with bacteria. So, eating soil is good.
A little bit.
In my house, my wife's sort of more of the generation where everything has to be super clean. Her dad was one of the guys who started Carnaby Street and fashion for kids. And when they left the house, they had to look really, really good. So it was all about clean. And I like to eat unclean foods because it's actually, the reason why shiitake or,
And by unclean, you just mean when you pick a carrot from the ground and there's a bit of dirt in it, you'll eat the dirt.
Bit of
Yeah,
dirt.
of course.
a little bit of dirt a day actually can give you B12. And, we clean everything off. And it's kind of funny because I got my son-in-laws, son-outlaws and various others. And I picked my salad straight from the garden. And I remember, one of them saying, "Oh, you're going to wash that?" I said, "Why? I think the water's dirtier than the plants, right?" And I made this salad, and it was really looking lovely.
Nice bit of crunch in it.
Then I just saw a little weevil and the little thing crawl out of it. I thought, ooh. But actually, in India, they did a big study, and they found that Indian vegans had less B12 deficiency. It's called pernicious anemia than Europeans. And they didn't know why. Apparently the same intake. And they actually learned it was the odd weevil or two in the lentils that was giving. So it's quite easy to get B12 when you're young, but when you're older, it does become
when
a
you're
problem.
more sanitized, yeah.
And then what about people who supplement once a week and they take a 2,500 milligram tablet versus people who supplement daily? Just if we get into the specifics around
B12 is a real exception in that it does store. To some
supposedly
extent.
7 years in your liver. That's what I heard.
Well, not that long,
supply.
but and vitamin D stores as well. So, in the winter I take 3,000 units of vitamin D. And actually, the so-called animal form D3 is the best, but lichen or lichen contains
grows on
vitamin
trees.
D3.
Which you get off trees.
Yeah. So I actually get my vitamin D from lichen or lichen. So that's the...
Like as in you go pick them off the trees and make a nice salad with it or put them on your porridge?
No,
Or
someone stuck them in a
little tablet.
supplement.
Someone dried them up and put them into dried
But the
capsules.
point is, the higher your vitamin D, the better your mood. The lower your risk for disease, the lower your risk for Alzheimer's.
Okay, and
Suppose
vitamin
if that-
D.
So vitamin D3 is in essence, it's kind of like captured sunlight, and we are solar powered
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So D3, you'd imagine, lots of sunlight, like the equator, where the longest living people on the planet typically live along that belt between.
Yeah, I know. And in COVID years, they were talking about absolute decimation of people in Kenya and Uganda and other such countries, Nigeria, and they didn't die. They had one of the lowest rates of death. And one of the reasons, I'm sure, was vitamin D. It was so obvious. People who had high vitamin D, were so much better off. A bit like you guys, a kind of a living experiment, and you try things out. When I started the Institute for Optimum Nutrition in 1984, I just took it on to be an experiment in what is optimum nutrition. And the first study we did with we thought maybe giving vitamins and minerals would increase IQ. So I did a pilot trial with a school teacher, Gwilym Roberts, and it worked. So we then thought, right, we need a proper randomized.
And this isn't educating them or teaching them how to pass the test. This is literally changing their nutrient
Yeah,
intake.
so we looked for a professor who was highly regarded. I stepped back, so I'm not actually on the paper, but I designed the study. And he said, you're crazy. There's absolutely no way giving a vitamin pill is going to change IQ. And we got BBC Horizon to film the whole thing and the Lancet Medical Journal to publish it. And we got a 10-point increase in IQ on the vitamins after 7 months and a 3-point on the placebo. And a 5-point difference, so a 7-point difference, a 5-point difference will get half of all children classified special educational needs back to normal.
And
Amazing.
what nutrients were you giving them?
I've got it because one of our dear friends, Harold, he's an amazing man, and he's all about transparency of vitamins and minerals and supplements, because he, in his research, that a lot of supplementation is, it's not your body can't absorb it because it's not coming from whole foods.
Yeah.
And he's very much about the transparency. So he's got an incredible business where we grow sprouts, where we partner with him. We grow sprouts, and he dries them up and makes incredible capsules and broccoli sprouts and incredible foods. And he's all about the transparency of supplements. So maybe, I know we're going off on a tangent here. I just wanted to know, because people listening are going, vitamins, okay, I need vitamins. But I think a topic we need to touch on is the quality of supplementation and isolated vitamins and minerals versus whole food supplements.
The first thing is I want to get absolutely as much nutrients as I can from food, number one.
Okay, brilliant.
Number two, I want to be optimally nourished. And if I work out, and a classic example is vitamin C. Because every single animal on the planet makes vitamin C, except for primates, bats, and the guinea pig, which is why
we're primates, so we don't.
We're primates. We don't make vitamin C.
So we need to get a true diet.
I mean, a gorilla, chimpanzee or whatever, a gorilla will eat 4.5 grams of vitamin C a day, which is 22 supermarket oranges. So that's what they eat. Now, here, it's a very good example, the gorilla. The single reason, the principal reason that we are suboptimally nourished is not, although all of these are true, the quality of the soil. It's not the quality of the plants. It's not because we eat crap food, refined, etc., all of which is true. The single biggest reason is we do not eat enough. And let me kind of explain that. I come from Wales. 10 years ago, they found a 40,000-year-old Homo sapiens remains. They assumed it was a woman. It's called Pavilan woman because it had all this jewelry made of shells, beautiful jewelry made of shells. When they analyzed the bones, it's a man. And when they do the testing on the bones, they realized that 1/4 of their diet was marine food. So we're talking, fish, seafood,
25%,
mussels, a quarter. Now, you have to assume that back then, when they had no home delivery and, no fridges and all the rest of it, they're walking, they're hunting, they're gathering wood, etc. They must have been expending double the calories, at least.
Oh, yeah,
at least, right? So if my diet was to get the same, and by the way, we'll talk about seafood, but other things. It's not just omega-3,
This
B
is brilliant.
vitamins,
I'm really enjoying this.
minerals, etc., etc., etc. So for me to get what our ancestors got for 99% of their entire evolution, and actually what they got that allowed Homo sapiens to develop, I would have to have half of my entire diet be food from the marine food web. And it would have to be wild, fresh, organic, nutrient-rich food. And we have moved so far away from that. And I'll give you an example of this because people do not realize how quickly things are changing. In 1901, to get into the army in Britain, to go and fight in the Boer War, you had to be 5 foot tall.
5 foot?
Yeah. Humans had shrunk on the industrial diet, which was largely carbohydrate and refined because they discovered sugar and they'd made white flour. They made white flour because the brown flour got eaten by the weevils. So if you refine the flour, it wouldn't support the life of an insect. And that's
Nothing
what
ate
they
it because
ate.
it wasn't food.
That's what they ate.
and
And they
also
shrank.
it wouldn't spoil as quick.
Yeah, and we shrank because we didn't know about protein. So in the early 1900s, they discovered protein, and that's when you go to work on an egg and the good British breakfast. And even though these figures are not quite so correct, by about the 50s, we've gone from 5 foot to 6 foot, just by changing what I would call the conditions of existence, the environment in which we live. And what we've got now is exactly the same, but in reverse. It is the lack of these B vitamins, omega nutrients, vitamin D, and also the lack of nutrients because we've filled our diet full of empty calories. We've filled our diet full of ultra-processed foods. And it is causing, this is how fast. I mean, if we have this conversation in 10 years, the world is in a mess. If we have it in 30 years, I guarantee you half of all children will have neurodevelopmental problems. So the rate of decay, and the brain is our USP. The brain is what's going to be hit hardest. And the biggest problem is, you and I know, we've got to get people back to growing food in the proper way. And
Real food.
respecting the soil and respecting the ocean and eating wild foods and all that sort of stuff. And, global warming or pollution or et cetera, et cetera. But we need intelligence to do that. And what's happening right now is our intelligence is leaking away. We're literally losing the USP of Homo sapiens.
Well, isn't it how we treat soil is how we, like, as we reduce the quality of our soil, which soil typically has the same diversity of microorganisms as our microbiome. And as we deplete our soil, we deplete our economies, we deplete our own nutrient level, our own biodiversity, our own...
Totally.
It's all linked.
It's all linked.
What
And
a
the point
surprise.
is you can grow food, zero dig, organic, biodynamic, or whatever. But if you don't have the minerals in the soil...
Nutrient-rich soil.
Yeah, because it all goes back actually to Darwin, because Darwin said, super bright guy.
Good man, Darwin.
A good man.
Big
He
shout out
said...
to Charles.
He was
said-
English, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And he was zinc deficient.
You're English too.
I'm 18% Irish in DNA.
Woo!
And I've kissed the Blarney Stone. But what Darwin said is there are two driving forces in evolution. One is natural selection, and the second is conditions of existence. Conditions of existence. Think of nutrition and the environment as
So
conditions.
therefore, on that one, in the conditions of existence now, we live in a processed world.
Well, yeah, but
so
he said
obesogenic.
conditions of existence is the more important, because it's only when the conditions change that different species do better or worse, which is natural selection. But what happened, and I'll tell you the story of the dinosaurs because it's kind of mind-blowing stuff.
I like your stories.
Yeah.
I'm really
It
enjoying
is
this.
great fun.
But the thing is that the imperialists loved natural selection, and they wrote out conditions of existence, which is called neo-Darwinism, because they could say the aristocrats' bloodline is superior to the plebs, and then the whites are superior to the blacks, and Hitler loved it with the Aryan race. And then genes came along, and everyone went batshit about genes, which is such a tiny part of our health, and everyone forgot that it's about the conditions of existence. So I'll tell you the dinosaur story, and then you'll see where plants come
Okay,
in.
yeah.
It's kind of fascinating. But I was saying to Professor Michael Crawford, who is a genius, in the 70s, he analyzed the fatty acids in 80 species. And they vary according to where the animal lives. So liver levels of different fats, except for the brain. The brain of every single animal from mouse to elephant to dolphin to human to tiger to every single animal has only two predominant fatty acids. One, omega-3 DHA, which is what comes from fish. Two, arachidonic acid, which is omega-6, which comes from plants, right? So I said to him, if the ocean is full of omega-3 DHA, which it is, why are fish so stupid? And he said, come on, Patrick. Mother cod lays 1 million eggs. So it's the mother's nutrition of one day divided by 1 million, and that is all the cod has to build its brain and body, right? So in other words, intelligence couldn't really take off until we had mammalian reproduction. Like our babies have had 9 months of a flood of nutrition. So how the hell did that happen? Because it was all eggs, it was all reptiles, until the dinosaurs got wiped out. So along comes a meteor or whatever, it might have been a supervolcano, dinosaurs are wiped out. And after the dinosaurs, there is this sudden explosion in life on the planet. And we have fruiting, flowering plants with edible seeds. This is really the beginning of omega-6, which is what you're getting in plants. So when you eat those lovely seeds.
Sunflower oil.
Yeah, all that sort of
almonds
stuff. And omega-6 is very sticky. And we think what probably happened was the egg, instead of being laid, started to stick. And eventually we move into mammalian reproduction. And omega-6 massively creates blood vessels. And a baby, by the second month, the fetal development, has a heart. So actually, the reason we became Homo sapiens had to be, there's no other explanation, that we were the waterside ape. We became upright wading in water. eating a lot of marine food and plant food. You had to have had both. There's no other way this could have occurred. I just had my 5th grandson a few weeks ago, and there's a picture in the hospital, and he's got that sort of funny white waxy stuff called vernix, which they wipe off the baby. And David Attenborough, he said, I've never seen vernix in a land-based mammal. I wonder if they occur in the marine mammals. And some marine biologists picked up on it. And sure enough, seals, sea lions, all the marine mammals. And by the way, the dolphin was the last mammal to leave the land fully for the ocean. It has every single bone that you and I have in our hands and our arms in its flippers. And the marine animals and humans have identical vernix. So the question is, how the hell did we go from a brain size of 380 grams max, which is what chimpanzees and gorillas have, up to 1,700 grams, Homo sapiens peaking around 30,000 years ago, down to 1,330 grams today.
That's the average brain today.
Today, we've lost.
That's the decline due to nutrient
And
deficiency.
you reckon it's down to nutrient deficiency in food?
And lack
I
of
think that
omega-3.
well,
Well, 20,000 years is a long time span to
the
kind of...
most logical explanation, and you won't like everything I say, but it's good because we can adapt.
No,
And
but it's
and I
great
wanna-
and provocative and it's fascinating.
And
I'm
I
really
want to
enjoying
tell
it.
you the solution as well, especially because you're right here by the ocean, is that we moved away from being the waterside ape along estuaries and rivers full of mussels and shells, fish and little rock pools, catching the fish and the tides and all the rest of it. We moved into land-based agriculture. So that was the fundamental shift that happened about 20,000 years ago. And that's when we start to get less of the omega-3, more of certain foods. It's what allowed our cultures to evolve because we could grow grains and we could feed more people and all the rest of it. Now, the situation we have right now, and I kid you not, we are going to be in a terrible, terrible way in the next few decades. It's happening already.
Well, isn't that what they said after COVID? They said the next big pandemic is a mental health pandemic. That was the World Health Organization.
It's happening already, but the question, if you think about it, is how, with the growing population, how do we get all these nutrients? And by the way, from algae, you can make omega-3 DHA. So if you're vegan...
Well, fish don't actually make it, don't they? It actually originates from algae. It's an algae... Fish get it because they eat lots of algae.
The kind of omega-3 in the algae is not what you get. The story for this was kind of cool. There's a guy called Dr. Hugh Sinclair from Cambridge who later was knighted. And he went to live with the Eskimos, who have no heart disease. And they have the highest intake of cholesterol and the highest intake of fat and no heart disease. So he shipped a crate of what they ate, which was seal meat, back to Cambridge, ate only seal meat and proved that it was really good for the heart. And then we learned that it was the plankton in the cold water that was rich in the first omega-3, which is alpha-linolenic acid. That's what you get in chia or flax. And you also get it in leaves. So it's in kale and cabbage and so on. And the little fish would eat that, and then the fish with teeth, like the mackerel and salmon, would eat the little fish, and then the seals would eat the fish with teeth, and then the Eskimos would eat the seals. And that's actually how we learned if you want to have a healthy heart, and now we know brain, you eat Eskimos.
You eat Eskimos?
Absolutely. But
Where do you buy an Eskimo?
they're really hard to find.
Can you get any organically grown ones? Sorry, that was a joke.
Biodynamic, absolutely. But it's all about this, and we need both. We need the plants and the wild. I mean, we have moved so far away from the diet that allowed
Jeez,
Homo
this is
sapiens.
gas. This is like
to live.
evolutionary
Yeah.
nutritional science.
But if you think about it, we were hunter-gatherers, and then we became farmers of the land.
Yeah.
And right now we're hunter-gatherers in the ocean, trawling and doing terrible things in the way we catch
Right now,
fish.
most of us are tech workers.
Tech
Or
workers.
information.
So the
economy.
solution is incredibly simple. And Professor Michael Crawford was in Japan, and he explained his thing, and the health minister there says, right, we need to agriculturalize the ocean. So what they meant by that is they took areas between various islands in Japan and created the conditions of existence to allow the marine food web back. They stopped trawling. They planted
It wasn't farming fish. It wasn't farming
no,
fish.
farming
The
fish.
opposite.
Farming fish is like a crazy thing. What they're doing is you create the conditions of existence for life, which is what we are doing with the food we eat. They planted seagrasses. They planted seaweeds. They looked at the species, the keystone species. One of them loves tubes, so they made artificial reefs with tubes in it. And within 2 years, they had increased the marine food web to such an extent they had 4 or 5 times more seafood.
Where was this? This was
This
Japan.
is in Japan.
Good on
I mean, they're taking it seriously. They have a very low rate of Alzheimer's. And then you get all the kelp, the wonderful seaweed. So, if you are vegan still, seaweed is really good. And what do we do with all this incredible kelp, which captures carbon? I mean, every other breath you take, the oxygen comes from the organisms in the ocean, more important than the Amazon. And you take that kelp and you take that seaweed, which is rich in iodine and selenium and zinc and whatever, and you put it on the land. Right? And then you get the minerals into the land. And with the minerals, you're creating the conditions of existence for life to occur in the soil, which then goes into the plant and then goes into you. So we can do all this. I mean, Ireland and Great Britain is just full of coast. I mean, the idea of factory farming salmon is just kind of insane. So we've got to take the oceans seriously and clean them up, but start creating the conditions of existence, which is marine agriculture. It will generate jobs. It's not a bad thing. And if you choose not to eat fish, then you can get omega-3, DHA, and so on. There are ways to do it. Personally,
Via algae.
I'm a pegan. I used to be vegan. I eat eggs. I think they're great. I don't
Pegan,
eat
I like
pegan.
that.
Yeah, I'm a pescatarian,
Pescatarian,
fishitarian.
vegan.
So I don't eat meat, and I don't eat milk. I say, if I'm 66, I'm still breastfeeding from another species of animal. Do you think I'm weird? I mean, tell me a mammal that consumes milk as an adult. There are none. So it's not evolutionarily required to consume dairy products, and there are reasons. It's a promoter of certain kinds of cancer. We know that for sure. So I have wheat, not too much. I have no milk. I have eggs. I have fish, and I have shitloads of vegetables and fruits and whole foods, organic.
And then to answer that question, where like me and Dave been eating a vegan diet for 20 years, in terms of getting their omega-3 DHA,
Yeah.
typically you get it in supplement form in the form of an algae or dried algae.
And I think
Or what about the idea of, sorry for cutting you off, there was like linseed or flaxseed or chia seeds or walnuts?
I love them. I eat
Yeah.
them. They're good.
Yeah.
So that alpha-linolenic acid has health benefits on its own, but only about 5% goes to DHA. So we need to do a blood test on you and measure your omega-3 index, and you have to be above 8% to have a healthy brain. Japanese have 10%. In the UK, the average is 4%. And the terrible thing, and this is kind of why I have the book Upgrade Your Brain, and we've launched Alzheimer's Prevention Day globally, and it is because this brain shrinkage and loss of cognitive function is actually occurring from the age of 18. We've now tested 400,000 people. So in other words, it's not like you're perfectly fine and then you hit 80 and you drop off the cliff into dementia. We can show with every 5 years of life worse cognitive function, which we measure for free at our charity, foodforthebrain.org. Anyone can do it. So your heart will be healthy and your energy will be good and so on. There's a lot of health that you can have. But if you are deficient in omega-3, behind the scenes, your mental sharpness will be falling. So I want to test you guys.
Yeah, great.
And also, I think, I didn't realize this myself, but the algae that they're using to make DHA in supplements are very specific, not genetically modified, but very specific strains of algae that actually incorporate DHA. So if you eat seaweed, you don't get it. It's still good food.
Type, yeah.
It's very specific.
So best to supplement with an algae that's very
Well, I
high
think
in
if you're
DHA.
vegan, you have to.
Yeah.
And tell me this now, what percentage of people would you speculate? Because you can't, this is obviously, you can't know exactly what a population study, how many might be deficient in omega-3. Like if you were to hazard a guess at, say, the UK and Ireland, for example, or a high income company, what income country
It's 80%.
80%
Deficient in
are
omega
likely to
3,
be
so-
deficient in omega 3.
Well, yeah. And how we define deficiency is increased risk of a disease. In other words, not efficient.
Or brain shrinkage.
Yeah.
indication
So
of
about
brain.
80% are below. When we do the blood test, which is a home test kit, it's really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. It was that little box where you test
and we test homocysteine,
omega 3.
vitamin D, omega 3, and HbA1c, which is the measure of blood sugar. Some people
that's the
say
diabetic one.
exactly. This Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. And
Yeah, do you want to talk about that? Because that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So, but just before we get into that, just to wrap it up for people, because we're hopping across loads of topics. So omega 3, the probability is that the vast
Many
majority
people.
of people are deficient in it.
Yeah.
And supplementation is a great thing for anyone who doesn't eat seafood.
Yeah.
And if anyone does eat seafood, what are the ones which you would recommend, or what would you recommend? Because I'm sure loads of our
you eat
listeners
the
eat
fish
seafood.
that eat fish. You
Okay,
you smash
the bigger
it.
fish. So
get a
Smash
bigger
it.
fish.
S for salmon, M for mackerel, A for anchovies, S for sardines, and H for herring or kipper. So it's
Okay.
the fish that eat fish. And by the way, do you know what is the richest source of DHA by a long way? You guess what it would be?
Algae.
Caviar.
Caviar.
The babies, the little
Caviar is packed full.
babies.
Wow.
And by the way, talking
So
about these
historically,
things,
that was the wealthiest
Yeah.
food. That was the most.
well, exactly. And then
But it was
let me
the-
tell you a story which you'll like. Goes back to the 70s. A guy I was working with, who was a leader in schizophrenia research, Dr. Carl Pfeiffer. These parents came to him and said, "Our girl is schizophrenic, but we know how to stop her being schizophrenic. If we give her an oyster a day, she's not schizophrenic." And they didn't know why, but an oyster a day made such a difference. And this guy, Carl Pfeiffer, he worked out it was zinc. Oysters are absolutely packed full of zinc. So we now know that oysters and caviar, a little glass of champagne, maybe, it's interesting how the lore, the folklore, to eat this or this or this. And now the science kind of shows, where that is at. And by the way, this is a little bit cheeky, but zinc is in anything that grows. So if you plant anything in the ground and it grows, it's got zinc. So a nut, a seed, zinc. Bean, zinc. Egg, zinc. And of course, in humans, therefore, the richest source of zinc would be in sperm,
There you go.
right? It's packed full of it. There's about 3 milligrams, per ejaculation, right? Now, the average boy in the UK and probably in Ireland eats about 7.5 milligrams of zinc, which is half what you need. You need 15. So I've been saying for a long time, eat nuts and seeds. So the chia and the walnut
get
and
the
the flax
zinc.
is really, really good. And back in the day, they used to say masturbation insanity, that you could go crazy if you...
Oh yeah. Because you're getting rid of the zinc.
Exactly. And you go blind,
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, we were always
And because
given
you
that one.
actually cannot use vitamin A in the eye if you don't have zinc. So this is all
So there
kind
is
of true.
some kind of truth in
Well,
if you
absolutely.
masturbate.
That you're going to masturbate yourself.
If young
to blind.
boys wank too much, they're
Well,
going to
3
go blind.
times a day and you've blown all your zinc.
Wow.
Hilarious. Hold
So-
on to your zinc, lads.
So keep
So
your
we've
seed.
done studies on over 100,000 people now, and the
This in terms of
single-
masturbation and zinc. is
No,
it?
not on masturbation zinc. But the single food group that most predicts health is nuts and seeds. So, if you ask me how much fruit, how much veg, how much fish, etc., the single food group that most predicts health is the people who eat the most nuts and seeds.
Wow.
So they're really good. So I love the chia and I love the flax, but very little of it will convert into omega-3
So the
DHA.
short of is it supplement if you're not someone who
Yeah.
eats fish. supplement with
DHA, smash
Yeah.
in terms of the fish. Okay.
DHA.
Can we move the topic on to, because we're covering this
Yeah.
is fascinating. I'm fascinated with all this. So I think we need to go into dementia and Alzheimer's.
All
And
right.
what is the difference and what is the current situation in terms of
All right.
I believe it's rivaling heart disease for the number one killer on the
Oh,
planet.
no, it's ahead of that. So number one, it's the number one killer. Number two, it costs more than all of cancer and heart disease combined. So it's the biggest healthcare cost, biggest fear, biggest killer.
This is Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the two?
Okay. So first of all, dementia is loss of cognitive function.
So
And if-
brain shrinkage, kind of.
Well,
No.
two parts: loss of cognitive function and brain shrinkage. But the way you diagnose dementia and pre-dementia, which is called mild cognitive impairment, is you run a cognitive function test. And that's what they do in memory clinics. And we got our charity, the first ever in the world, permission to digitize the cognitive function test. So anyone can go any day online and do the test. And if you think of
What's the URL for that for anyone who's studying?
Upgrade your brain.
foodforthebrain.org.
Okay, nice.
Right?
Foodforthebrain.org.
So you do the test and it shows you where you're at. Now, the thing is, much like a test for diabetes, think of it as a green zone, a yellow zone, or an orange zone, amber zone, and a red. So red is dementia, orange is mild cognitive impairment or pre-dementia, and green is okay. But if you ask, and we have the best scientists in the world, how okay is okay? Do you want to be at this end of the green or that end of the green? They don't know. We do now because we've tested 400,000 people, and that cognitive function is decreasing from the age of 18. We're just about to test 5-year-olds to 17-year-olds. So the point is that, you don't want to, it's a bit like diabetes. People say you either got it or you haven't. Actually, it's a slippery slope.
It's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum. You're heading in that direction. So dementia is loss of cognitive function, diagnosed with a cognitive function test. Alzheimer's is a very specific disease where a central region of the brain shrinks. So you cannot diagnose Alzheimer's without a brain scan, which was developed by members of my team at Oxford University, and it's used globally. And so 2/3 of dementia is Alzheimer's. 17% is what they call vascular dementia.
Which is cardiovascular based.
Yeah, and 10% they call mixed, which is usually vascular Alzheimer's. Vascular dementia is driven by exactly the same things. It's prevented in exactly the same way. So 89% of dementias can be prevented. And if you get your omegas up, B vitamins, B12, we've covered, terribly important. You get your sugar down.
So say that there. You said so. B vitamins. We talked about B12. What about the other B vitamins? Are they typically, if people were eating more healthier choices, less processed foods, they're likely to get lots of B
the
vitamins?
critical ones are folate, which is what you get in foliage, which is what you get in greens. So all the wonderful food that you guys sell and grow, that's tremendously rich in folate. B6 is important, but it's in whole foods. And the B12 we know is only in animal foods, seafoods, eggs,
soil.
and so on. Yeah, or dirty soil, exactly.
A friend on that. A friend literally puts soil in his smoothie. He puts like a
tablespoon
of soil in his family smoothie every morning.
Doesn't tell them, but now maybe
Yeah.
maybe they're catching on.
I won't
They get
tell
older.
who that
Why
friend
not?
is, but
And
it's-
I mean, but then amazing discovery has been made by my group, actually, and which is that the B vitamins, what happened was the guy at Oxford, David Smith, second in charge, Oxford Medical School, runs a study of people with pre-dementia, half given B6, B12, folic acid, half given placebo. And he halves the rate of brain shrinkage with the B vitamins over a year. He then realizes, hang on a second, omega-3 is really important. You can't build the brain without omega-3. And the B vitamins actually bind the omega-3 into the brain. So he went back to the original blood samples in the trial and split the group, the participants, into third lowest omega-3, third highest omega-3. And then he finds the B vitamins had no effect if you're low in omega-3. And in those who were in the highest third, 73% less brain shrinkage. Now, to put this into context, the latest drug, which has killed 4 people, had the guys on the drug.
So what was this drug? This was a drug
lecanemab.
but it was a drug for dementia or Alzheimer's or
Yeah,
something?
there's a massive con that's going on right now, and unfortunately people are going to fall for it. In the brains of people with Alzheimer's, you get amyloid plaque. Think of it like, in your teeth you get plaque. And it's a bit like, the story, which is a myth, which is cholesterol is the cause of heart disease. We knew back in the 70s that wasn't true. So the idea is, I feel fine, but I got a high cholesterol. I've got to take statins. So cholesterol became the way to sell statins. And right now, amyloid, they've spent $100 billion getting to the point of being able to inject an anti-amyloid antibody that targets the amyloid plaque, and they work. They actually, 14 trials show that they reduce amyloid plaque, but have no clinical benefit at all. A third get brain bleeding or swelling. 4 died in the last trial, 3 in the one before it. but they're going to sell this. I guarantee you, in 3 years' time, perhaps when you hit 50, in your standard blood test from the doctor, they'll measure some amyloid marker and say, oh, you need the drug. And right now in the UK, they got a £10 million budget, which is funded by Bill Gates largely, to find the blood test to say if you'll get dementia. Now, it's a bit like me saying to you, would you like a blood test to test how unfit you are? You go, hang on a second, wouldn't I have a fitness test? So if you want to know who's heading for dementia, run a cognitive function test, which is
makes
free,
sense.
which we do every day, right? And that's how you define the thing. So on the one hand, right now, we know that B vitamins with omega-3 and a lovely plant-based diet, high in lots of folate, stops this accelerated brain shrinkage. Or, you can have a really unethical drug, in my opinion, which will increase brain shrinkage and make a lot of money. Oh, because the critical point, in case you listeners do not realize, is that you cannot make money unless you can patent something. And you cannot patent something if nature has already made it. And unfortunately, it's because of that line that we keep being sold drugs rather than the real medicine, the good medicine, which is food.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. So I'm sure lots of people listening are going, this is fascinating. This has blown my mind in loads of ways. Hey, let's make it really practical. So there's a lot of people out there that are worried about dementia and Alzheimer's, and they're whatever age they are. They're 40, they're 50, they're 60, they're 70, and they're going...
They're 18 plus.
They're 18 plus, or they might be concerned about their parent, a family member, and they're going, how do we prevent this dementia and Alzheimer's? Or if we feel an inkling, how do we reduce the risk?
Quit the sugar.
Sugar, okay, quit the sugar.
Don't do fruit juice, eat your fruit.
Yeah.
Nature never gives you sugar without fiber.
Yeah.
That's a really important point. Generally, eat less carbs, but eat loads of vegetables. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, food that comes out of a tree, out of the ground. Make at least half of everything on your plate. That salad or...
More food from a factory, more food from a field and less from a factory.
Yeah, if you can't understand the ingredients on the label, don't get it. I mean, I have not bought sugar for 40 years. I actually, we don't have to go into this, but I haven't bought salt. The only salt I have is for my dishwasher. So as much as you can, buy the healthiest food because it literally becomes you. So that's kind of rule number one. Get the sugar down, get the fruit and veg up, which will give you a lot of the folate, B
and
vitamins.
the B vitamins.
If you happen to be totally plant-based, you've got to supplement B12 and omega-3 DHA. Otherwise, eat
Great tips.
Oily fish. And if you do all that, you're really, really in the right direction. But you also have to use your mind. It's terribly important to be failing. You need to be, there is this crazy thing that you learn up until you're 18 or go to university, maybe 21, and then you get a job, and after a while...
And then your brain's fixed.
Yeah, and then your brain's fixed and you do nothing. You learn nothing new.
Well, it's like that expression that my mind is so active except between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like...
Or even you hear regularly that,
Yeah.
like my wife is Polish, and Justina just speaks Polish to the kids, and the kids picked it up really, really quick.
Yeah.
But I'm like, of course they picked it up. And adults, you'll hear regularly, oh, I can't learn a language. It was like, of course you could. If someone spoke nothing but the only language you heard for 3 years was the same language, of course you'd pick it up the same. But as humans, we tend to be afraid to try new things.
Yeah.
Whereas neuroplasticity, we're all neuroplastic.
Exactly. So we say it's good to fail. Learn a musical instrument, be crap at it. That's really good. Actually, in studies of amateur musicians versus, professionals, the amateurs do better in brain. If you're like exercising, if you're on a treadmill and you're doing exactly the same thing, you have much more stimulation of the brain, much less stimulation than if you're like running up a craggy hill or mountain
because you got to engage your...
Yeah. So it's anything that...
Try new stuff.
Well, it's a bit like the summary is growth. It's about like stagnation or autopilot repetition is not going to continue brain
Evolve or
development.
die.
I want to, and the earlier you start, the better. And the amazing thing is your brain just sings. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm on tour at the moment, different city every day. And, my wife, Gabby, will say the same thing.
Playing all your number ones.
When I hit the pillow, I'm asleep in 1 minute. I just straight out. And then I wake up early, completely alert. I don't need coffee. I'm alert. And for most people, that's like, really? That's kind of strange. But when you get your nutrition right, that's how it is. So I want to tell you two stories. Abraham Hoffer, that was the psychiatrist who first turned me on in Canada.
Abraham Hoffer.
Abraham Hoffer, a wonderful man. He was a Quaker. And he was in charge of schizophrenia in Canada. And when he had a schizophrenic patient, he said every human needs three things. One is a place they can call home. Two is someone they can call a friend. And 3 square meals a day. And when he had a patient who didn't have those things, he said, come and live with us.
Good
So I
man.
know his kids. His son's a professor of medicine, and they have very interesting stories. But he treated successfully 3,000 schizophrenic patients. That's how I got into this, because I
That
read.
they all came and lived with him.
Oh, well, no, what
Sorry,
happened was, he worked out it was about B vitamins, and he ran the first ever double-blind controlled trial on the history of psychiatry. High-dose B vitamins, now we know why, it's to do with something called methylation, or placebo. Amazing results. I flew over there in the early 80s, having read his research, and I said, how many people have you treated successfully? Or how many have you treated? He said, 3,000. I said, what is your success rate? He said, 85% cure. I said, I've never seen a cured schizophrenic. Please define your terms. And he said, free of symptoms, able to socialize with family and friends, and paying income tax. And that I had never seen.
Paying income tax is a good
You know?
one.
And I mean, last night at our gig in Dublin, there's a guy lurking in the hotel who's here to go to various mental health clinics. He's on 8 different medications. And I checked in with him, and he was zombified from the drugs with mental illness. And I said, you got to come tonight. This does not need to happen. It really doesn't. And he's super bright. I can tell he's bright. And these drugs will never make him well. And we'll stay in touch. And there's a very good chance within 6 months he'll be off all medication and living life. Now, Abraham Hoffer, in his mid-90s, 2 weeks before his death, stopped seeing patients. 4 days before his death, he said to his friend, I'm not feeling very well. 2 days before his death, he checked into the local hospital. He didn't have any disease as such. His organs just started to close down. He died not in pain, with no medication, 2 weeks off work. And that is actually
He died in his holidays.
Yeah, that's how it should be. If you are optimally nourished. Now, the next story I'll tell you. In December, there is a guy, well, basically, he's called Nodge, Alan. Nodge is his nickname. His wife is Dorothy. Dorothy keeps finding him in different rooms in his house because he can't find the loo.
So he's
in his
pissing, literally
own
pissing
house.
in the corner.
Yeah, where is he? He doesn't know where he is in his own house. So he goes, to the doctor and the memory clinic, and they diagnose mixed dementia, Alzheimer's and vascular. He cannot conceive of time. So tomorrow does not exist. He's an avid gardener. He couldn't plant his garden. He's a computer programmer. He couldn't even turn his computer on. He couldn't eat and talk. He was sort of there. And she said, well, what can we do? And they said, nothing. And they went online and they found foodforthebrain.org, did the cognitive function test. Obviously, his score was in the red. But there's a questionnaire. And after the questionnaire, it shows you exactly, is it the sugar, is it the B vitamins, is it the omegas, is it the active mind, is it the active body, is it the healthy gut, what is it? And she followed all the instructions. He went to bed an hour earlier, he quit the sugar, he started to have this CA oil, the MCT oil, 2 tablespoons a day. He upped his vegetables and fruits. He joined a Morris dancing group. And his cognitive function has improved massively. I wish he would have started 5 or 10 years ago, because probably he will still decline. But she says, I've got my husband back from dementia. And he's planted his whole spring garden.
Wow.
And
That's inspiring.
if you go to the website...
Good man, Nudge.
Yeah, if you go to the website...
Foodforthebrain.org.
Well, yeah, but also alzheimersprevention.info, because this is the site for our global campaign on Alzheimer's, alzheimersprevention.info, because you'll actually, each expert, and I've got 14 professors around the world, have done a 3-minute film on something. I did mine on B vitamins, someone else on omegas, someone else on alcohol, someone else on active body, whatever. And there's a 30-second challenge, which I really want you guys to do. And that's just a selfie of something that you do that helps prevent Alzheimer's. Could be anything. Could be flossing your teeth. It could be gardening. You'll think of something
Doing a
smart,
handstand.
and you just do it and post it, and you'll see Nodge and Dorothy there, because theirs is they go foraging. So you'll see them. They've made a little film, and foraging uses mind and body. That's what they do. So I'm going to do one. I'm going to be paragliding.
Nice.
Using my mind and body. So what do you do? Because we're in the middle of a lemdemic, right? It's like a lemdemic. Yeah,
We're
it's
becoming
about-
lemmings.
Well,
Lemmings.
what I mean is falling out of the sky are all these lemmings with dementia. And there's more and more of them, and there are all these charities, and I've approached every charity I know in Ireland and in the UK, and none of them are doing anything really on prevention at all. So they want better care in the community. Our Prime Minister, David Cameron, said, make Britain dementia friendly. I said, no, let's make it dementia unfriendly. Let's stop this thing. So, they're having you run marathons and raise money for the Alzheimer's Society and this and that and whatever. So we got better care. The same thing is kind of happening now with, neurodivergence and autism. I agree. Let's look after all these wonderful children, absolutely, and all the rest of it, and have better facilities. But it's a lemdemic, because there's a couple of radical lemmings. They've climbed up the cliff and they've stuck up a sign and it says, don't jump. It is not more money. It is not more doctors. It is not more nurses. It is not more anything that will save our health. It is less patience, which means prevention. And until prevention and until brain health and nutrition are number one on the agenda, we're going to be repeatedly in a mess. So we need everyone listening, and yourselves as you are, to not only encourage eating all this important, good, wild, fantastic food, but we've got to start a revolution. And it ain't going to come from our health service. It's not going to come from our
it's grand.
It's
policies.
not going to come from
It's
corporations.
got to come from us.
Yeah.
And that is why we hope by the end of next year to have tested a million people. We call them citizen scientists. So, of course, you do the test online to find out about yourself. But now we have that data, which is immediately anonymized, by the way, and never shared with a third party. And then some people do the blood tests, and we'll follow you up every 6 months. And those who change nothing are useful, because then we can see what happens if you change nothing. And those who change something, we can see what that effect is. And I believe we have vastly underestimated.
And this is the test that does, it measures B vitamins, DHA.
Well, number one, the cognitive
homocysteine.
function test, which is free online.
Oh, yeah.
So that's like your yardstick of where is my cognition.
Yeah.
Then the questionnaire, which we call the cognition questionnaire, which asks you about your diet and lifestyle and things like, do you eat organic and
And
how
does it
much?
give you a number or something as well?
Absolutely. If you're doing everything wrong, you score 100% on the dementia risk index. And if you're doing everything right, you score 0%. So you are in control. And then the blood tests add biological data to this. And we want to track 1 million people and find out what is that perfect combination, active body, active mind, B vitamins, omegas, healthy gut, what's the perfect combination that absolutely upgrades your brain, dementia-proofs your diet and your lifestyle. You are the architect of your own brain's destiny. You do not need to lose your mind, and that's
Very cool.
my
Great
whole
cause. Very important.
Brilliant.
upgrade.
And like to
Amazing.
recap, anyone listening, some basic things that you can do. Number 1, cut the sugar. Number 2, focus on whole foods as much as you can. Number 3,
Omega-3.
omega-3. And if you're plant-based, supplement with DHA, or else smash in terms of oily fish. In terms of vitamin D in winter, ideally supplement with 500 was the number you suggested. As
3,000.
opposed to
3,000. There was one
3,000.
thing you mentioned there was alcohol. You said no sugars, and I know alcohol is it's pretty much sugar.
On dementia, you have less risk if you drink 125 mils, which is a small glass of red wine a day, than if you drink nothing. But as soon as you start to go up, it's a very big promoter of dementia. There's no question. So in a sense, you kind of got to not drink too much. But what happens is people drink because they're stressed, and the alcohol promotes GABA for 1 hour, which switches off adrenaline. And then actually you lose GABA, so you wake up tired.
GABA as in chat and talk. And
No,
is
it's GABA aminobutyric acid.
I thought you meant gabble as in we gabble more. You drink alcohol, you gabble.
There's a thing that switches off adrenaline, which is called GABA. And what happens is alcohol ultimately depletes it, but for an hour it promotes it, which is why you're really stressed. You have that pint and you forget about all your problems. So in other words, alcohol works. But the effect wears off, so you have another pint, and then another pint,
Yeah,
and then you go
get
to sleep.
more.
But then it depresses GABA, so you wake up tired, anxious, grumpy, irritable. So you use sugar and caffeine, to get yourself going. And then by the end of the day, you're stressed, so you need alcohol, and you're stuck in a cycle of sugar, caffeine, alcohol, round and round you go. But when you change to really good food, then you can break this cycle and, have a whiskey at the end of the day. It's not a big deal. But, have a glass of wine, don't have a bottle of wine.
That's the challenge there now you've set to people. Have a glass, because typically, yeah. Anyway, this has been fascinating. It really is. Really is. Will you tell us about your new book? Because the book is kind of like, the book is just out now.
It's called Upgrade Your Brain.
It's called Upgrade Your Brain. And what I love...
And you've written 30 books, so this is...
Well, no, 48.
48 books!
Yeah. Basically, I left running the Institute in 1998 and started writing. And I always think this is the last one. But what I love here is...
This is the last one, is it?
The last one. Well, no, I'm halfway through a fiction book.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I do poems and songs and raps.
Yeah, and they're gas.
And
Maybe
stuff.
we'll finish
So I
one
want
of
to do a
them.
little bit more creative, artistic. And I have written a fiction book that kind of is interesting. Anyway,
I have no doubt.
Upgrade Your Brain. But the point is, I've interviewed and worked with these professors who are geniuses in one thing. They are the masters. I'm the jack of all trades. But when you put the pieces together, you go, wow, this is powerful.
Because on the cover it has a cog with different colours. So obviously those are the pieces of the puzzle that when you put them together, your risk of dementia or Alzheimer's drops.
Gone. 8 steps to optimize your brain for better mood, memory, and sleep. And I guarantee you that however powerful you think food is, however important you think nutrition is, it's way more than what you imagine. And there is nothing more important than making sure that every mouthful that you put in your mouth is putting nutrients into your body. Avoid the empty calories. And as a consequence of that, there's only one problem that you are going to have, and you will have this, which is what do you do with all this extra energy? I write books.
And you're quite good at 48 of them. How many books have you sold? Have you sold millions? Many millions.
They're in 31 languages.
Good work.
And the Optimum Nutrition Bible is currently transforming China. It's one of the most read, books out there, and the Chinese are waking up.
That's great work. Millions of books. Well
and
done,
the principles apply to anyone in any language, in any culture.
I wonder, could we finish with a poem? One of your nice
A poem
poems?
or a
Remember-
rap.
One
Maybe
of
not a
the-
rap because we don't have all the facilities here, but maybe
Well, I'll
a
give
poem.
you. I'll give
poem.
you.
You had
I'll
a
give
good
you
poem.
a little one, and it's called ignosis. People are living asleep, dying asleep, herded like sheep by idiots from the deep state. I hope it's not too late to delete the ignosis. This is where I forget the.
What does
bloody word.
ignosis mean?
Well, gnosis is knowledge. Ignosis is no knowledge.
Okay, sorry, back to the poem.
Yeah. Living asleep, dying asleep, herded like sheep by idiots from the deep state. I hope it's not too late to wake them up from hypnosis, delete the ignosis, feel the sun, smell the roses. We are one. Life is good. People are kind. Love and peace is a state of mind.
Patrick Holford, you the man.
You're a gem, you really are.
That was
I've enjoyed
great
this
fun.
immensely.
Brilliant.
You're fabulous.
Thank
you really
you very
are.
much.
So, website is
foodforthebrain.org.
foodforthebrain.org.
Yeah,
We've
I've
got
got a website
preventalzheimers.info.
called patrickholford.com as well.
Yep.
If you have any diseases, you can put them in, and I've probably written something on it. The Alzheimer's Prevention Day International Global Campaign.
Preventalzheimers.info.
Alzheimersprevention.info. And there's a ton of really good stuff. Do the test.
Do the test. Cognitive
Do the
test on foodforthebrain.org. Brilliant. Thanks, Mel, for listening. Ciao,
Lots of
ciao.
love. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
While we have you, once a week we write a newsletter. It's called Happier. It's got simple, tried and tested practices to make your life better.
We include recipes and practices that you can apply on a daily basis to make your life happier.
We've had lots of people say before that it's really helped make their life better. So you can sign up on the happypear.ie, our weekly newsletter called Happier.